Welcome to my review of Rocket Knight Adventures for the Sega Genesis. This is a great game for the system. Actually, I thought it was one of the best games on the Genesis, especially for this type of game. So it's definitely a fucking spoiler as far as my opinion on the game, but yeah, it's a great game. It took me a little bit over 6 hours to beat. The sequel on the Genesis, Sparkster, took about half that time, and the sequel has passwords and is quite a bit easier. So if you find this one to be difficult, you may want to try Sparkster and start with that one to get familiar with the game, and you get passwords for that one, so it's a lot easier. In this game, you have limited continues, so you have to memorize it and learn it. So, it is harder in that sense. But it's a very good game. And it has, very creative boss fights, great environments. The movement mechanic is great with how you can launch in different directions using your rocket launch. And you use that on bosses. And you pretty much use that for everything in the game. For your movement. It gives you very fast movement, and you have to make some very skilled maneuvers, precise maneuvers, get into small openings using it. It's very well implemented. And the game has a great variety. You see the boss fights here, they got nice hits to them. And really, I think that this game is in line with any of the Sonic games. I think it's equal to any of the Sonic games. And definitely better than the first Sonic game on Genesis. So you have shooter-style levels mixed in with the gameplay. The visuals are top-notch. I think they're some of the best on the system. And, like I said, the first Sonic, it was a huge game for me back then. But it is really, it's not that well designed. The levels are pretty slow-paced. You got the shitty water level. I thought it was, in retrospect, I think it's a kind of a weak Sonic game. The other ones made use of the speed aspect of the character much better, without having to wait around for platforms and all that shit. And, in Sonic 1, if you rush ahead, you hit the spikes and shit. So I'll have to review that another time. But yeah, you can see here, very fun boss fights. You use your dash mechanic pretty much to launch into bosses and damage them most of the time. You also have a sword attack. And, a lot of the bosses are your typical, pattern memorization for these type of games. But just very enjoyable fights. They're pretty creative. They usually have a lot of different attacks. So there's a nice variety. The pacing is great as you're always, going to, different environments and different gameplay styles. Like sometimes you'll be riding a cart and fighting enemies. Other times you'll be, like here you're riding a cart while fighting enemies, so it shakes it up a little bit. Sometimes you'll be swimming. And then, of course, you have the shooter levels, which there's a few of to mix things up. There's several shooter sections where you're just flying and shooting stuff like a spaceship shooter. So really a great game. I beat it fairly recently. I ended up thinking it was one of the best games on the system, even though I experienced it late. Of course, I knew about it back then, but I could only access so many games back then, so I had to, try to choose wisely which games I was going to, purchase. Occasionally you got rentals and stuff, but they didn't always have the shit that, you would want to try. So yeah, really, really good action. And of course, the best way to experience it for me was to use save and load states and just play through using save and load states to practice any sections that seemed like they might give me trouble. So just to make sure that I had them down. And then after one practice run of the game, beating the game with save and load states, practicing any parts. I may beat a part 2 or 3 times to make sure that I have it down if it seems like a hard part. Sometimes I'll only beat a part once and I'm satisfied that it's good enough. And then after doing that, my practice session is done, and then I'll start making full attempts at the game. That's how I play a lot of these games. So I recommend doing that for these types of games. I think it's a great way to play them. It really opens them up and saves you a lot of time repeating parts. Otherwise you're repeating parts that you don't really need to practice again because you already know how to do them. So I like doing that isolated practice. I like the graphics here with the reflections on the lava. Very cool. Now this stage itself, I didn't really like too much. This section was kind of irritating because you really have to wait around and occasionally you'll get burned. And it's kind of irritating. I don't love this section, that's for sure. But it is very cool looking. I like that they tried to mix up the gameplay. But, not one of my favorite sections of the game, but it was solid. I thought it was a solid enough section. It's short. It's not too long. So now this part's pretty cool. You have to ride this half-bodied robot and just ride it through. And you get off at certain points when the spikes show up. You fight enemies. I thought this was a very cool little segment. And the game is full with these type of creative segments, very well done. I really, really liked this game a lot. I thought it was great. And I kind of fucking gave it away in the beginning of the review, but, it's kind of hard to hold back on stating the obvious, I will definitely have to review Sparkster as well, the sequel, and I have to beat the one on Super Nintendo. There's only one entry on Super Nintendo called Sparkster. I didn't beat that yet. It seemed very good, though. I have to work on that. I'll have to beat that soon. So, yeah, this boss was kind of interesting. Now, this boss is pretty irritating, but it's cool. It's a cool concept with jumping on the platforms. I wouldn't say it's a badly designed fight or anything like that. It's just that it's a bit of a pain in the ass. But you get it with practice. It's not the most fun boss to fight, probably, but it is cool. So that was an interesting fight. Here's another mix-up where you have a windy stage where you have to grab onto these poles and try to, jet through. It's kind of cool. It's something different. You really have a nice mix of gameplay styles, which is what I tried to show in the review. I went through my entire playthrough and I tried to edit out highlights that I remembered from when I beat it. Some of the different looking stages, cool scenes, to give an overall feel for the game is what I pretty much tried to do. Now I call this a quick review, but it's only quick in the sense that it was fast for me to edit the footage out of my single video playthrough. But when I'm doing the review, I do go pretty in depth, so it's kind of a long review. I mean, 18 minutes is not really that quick, but relative to the in-depth reviews that I've had posted up on the channel, one that my friend did on Doom Eternal that dropped today. That's a very in-depth review. That one probably took a few months for him to put together. I had a little input on it, but that was pretty much all him, and his brother edited that. So, not much input from me. But yeah, every Monday I'm going to try to put out a review in this style, which is pretty quick for me to put together. I do the editing, which takes me about, maybe could take 15 minutes, maybe a little longer. Sometimes I have to edit it again to shorten it because it's the first editing pass can be a little bit long. So sometimes I'll go through a few times and get it down to a decent length. I don't want to make them 40 minutes long really. So now this is another shooter level. This is a very cool one. The visuals on this are some of the best I've seen on the Genesis. The use of colors. I mean, this looked great even on a 65-inch OLED TV. Running through, emulation, of course, with the graphic filters and everything. But, I mean, it's a great-looking game. But, yeah, this was a very cool stage. The music is also top-notch. It's close to being on par with the Sonic series in music. And the gameplay, in a lot of ways, is better than a lot of the Sonic games. I mean, in the Sonic games, the main gimmick you have is you have your spin dash, which is very cool. But you're limited to just spin dashing on the ground and moving along the ground fast for the most part. In this game, you have a dash that you can diagonally shoot up in the air, and it's just a lot more exciting to use against bosses. You bounce around. It's a cool thing to try to control. So I think in some ways this game is even better than the Sonic games. I mean, I think it's very debatable. I mean, I could see someone's argument saying that they like this better than the four Sonic games, the four mainline Sonic games on the Genesis. So, I mean, I would put this up there with any of those. And, Sparkster is on that level, too, but I think I like this one better. I have to go through the footage of Sparkster again, and maybe I'll do a review on that as well for Genesis. Like I said, I definitely need to complete the Super Nintendo one so I can do a review on that and compare it to these. I've beaten the two games on the Genesis only so far. I never beat the Super Nintendo one. There's only one on the Super Nintendo. That's Sparkster. That also has passwords, but it seems pretty challenging. It seems a lot harder than the Genesis one from what I played. And, yeah, there's some modern Rocket Knight adventure game that does not look good at all. Did not try that for Xbox 360. So now on this stage, this is kind of a trial and error memorization kind of stage. A little bit heavy with that. You got to fall and be quick. Reminds me a little something as a Battletoads or something level But of course, much simpler than that. There's nothing in this game that's as challenging as that. The controls in this game are much better than Battletoads to begin with, so that's already a huge benefit. This stage is kind of cool. This area, actually, this section, you have to hit these arrows to change the direction of the platform. That's pretty unique. You don't really see that too much. So I thought that was cool. Like I said, this game is filled with great gameplay ideas, and most of them most of them work out pretty well. They're mostly pretty enjoyable to play and learn. I don't really recall any bad parts in this game where I really didn't like it. There were some parts that I didn't really enjoy, but they were usually short. For the most part, I thought this was a great game. It doesn't have any shitty levels in it like Sonic 1, with the water level. Don't get me wrong, I love the Sonic games, but some of the later Genesis games really blew it away. Games like this is, I'd say, one of the best platformers on the system, if not, it's up there. This level's pretty cool, too. This is, you have to rush through this area real quick, which is a little challenging, but then at the end, you have to fight, you get in the robots and you box the other boss. Very cool. It's been done in the series before. I think it's in Sparkster and for Genesis or Super Nintendo. It might be in both of those. Though now, in execution, I gotta say, this part is irritating. I really like the idea, though. I think it's cool that you get in this robot and start boxing. Very, very cool concept. I did find it kind of irritating when practicing it to always get it consistently. I do find this part to be kind of irritating. But it's very learnable. It's just kind of irritating. The openings are not really where you think they would be. At least for me, that's how it was. I had to practice to really get the timing down because it's not real clear when it's open to get the hit in. So it's actually kind of a hard part initially because you don't really know exactly how to hit the boss. So it was a little bit of a pain in the ass. But once you learn it, it's not too bad. It just, use save and load states to practice. So now you have another shooter stage. This one's really cool because this is like a really fleshed out shooter stage, pretty long shooter stage. It's all spaceship shooter style, which is really cool to mix into a platformer. You really didn't see many games with this kind of variety back then in a single game. It's really well done. It's not so much the fact that they mix shooter stages with side-scrolling, walking type of stages. It's that there's so many different gameplay styles, like riding the carts, and just different mechanics. Every level kind of feels fresh. Usually there's some different mechanic in each area, it seems. It's one of those really well-designed games. That boss is a little tricky, I think, at first. Initially, it was a little tricky, but it's a good kind of challenge mostly. The game doesn't really have any bullshit in it. It's pretty legit. So yeah, this boss can also be tricky. This last stage is cool. It's a boss gauntlet, but it's not recycled bosses like a lot of these older games do. It's all new bosses, just a lot of them. So it's actually very cool. And I think I show a little bit of each boss form to give an idea of what's on the last stage. But it's pretty much a boss gauntlet. It's not much actual regular gameplay at all in this stage. It's pretty much all boss fights. So it's a cool way to end the game. And then the final boss is kind of multifaceted. It takes a little while to take down. And then you have to actually do an escape sequence from the boss where you actually fight it and escape. It's a very cool ending. The whole game is pretty much strong from beginning to end, I thought. So yeah, after that introduction to that first boss, then you fight this guy. And he can be a little tricky. It's kind of cool fighting a boss that's the same size as you and same speed, Same kind of fight as fighting yourself, pretty much. It's pretty cool to mix in. And then after that, you have the final boss, basically. It has a few forms. And you have to hit this red bolt that comes out of it. And it's actually a lot of fun trying to aim your dash at it and get those hits in. It's a real satisfying to get the hits in. Very fun fight. And it's a little tricky. It definitely takes some practice. I recommend using the save and load states again to practice all this. You want to make sure you have this down because you don't want to get all the way to the end of the game. It's fairly long. It's maybe around an hour long. You get to the end and then, of course, you die on the last boss and lose all your lives. Then you got to restart the game. So definitely recommend practicing the hardest parts with saving and loading. And I did a tutorial on this game as well, so I have all my tips and everything on the game in that. So check that out if you're interested. But yeah, real good game. I can definitely highly recommend this game. What I'm going to start doing is having 2 scores for my reviews, I think. One's going to be how the game holds up today, and another's probably going to be how it held up, in the past when it came out. So I'm going to try to do it like that because it's very different. I mean, a lot of games were, very impressive when they first came out, but they don't always hold up well. So I'm going to try to do that. I think this game is an easy, 8 today. I mean, I think it's a top-notch platformer. Now, some newer platformers like Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze, or there's 3D platformers now that are really good. I'm sure some of those games are better than this, but it's debatable. It depends what you like, though, too, of course. So it is hard to do these kind of reviews, but I'm going to say that it still holds up as a solid 8 out of 10 today. I think that's a fair rating. I think it's a great game. I think it's one of the best 16-bit platformers. So take that as you will. I've played through a lot of games, so this really stands out for me. And as far as when this game came out, I mean, this was probably like, a 9, maybe even a 10. I mean, this is probably at the top of the heap, you know what I mean? Like I said, I think this is one of the best platformers, especially a game in this style at the time. I think this was top-notch. I would have loved to own this game back then. This would have been like, up there at the top with any of the Sonic games that I, really highly regarded back then. Now, of course, I like something like Shinobi 3 a lot better than this. That's one of my favorite Genesis games. But it's not a platformer in this style. It's kind of a different type of game, different feeling game. But I think this is like at the top of these type of games. And I think it's one of the best games on the system for sure. So yeah, at the end here, you have a little escape sequence. Takes a little practice because you can end up taking damage from some of this shit if you don't know what to do. You just got to know what to do. It's not really too difficult if you know what to do. But you do have to last a while. You can't fight. You just have to dodge. So it's kind of cool that they put you in a circumstance where you're just trying to dodge and get to safety. It mixes it up even at the end of the game, which is very cool. Cool way to end the game. And it's a satisfying way to complete the game, doing this escape sequence, and then you finally get to the end and beat it. It's a nice, satisfying conclusion. But yeah, definitely practice this part as well with some save and load states. You want to get this part down. I actually fucked up on this part a few times and had to refight the entire boss fight again a few times. So it was very frustrating when I didn't have it down. I probably should have practiced it more. But yeah, that's pretty much it. It's a great game. Let me know if you have any questions, and thanks for watching.